So this is the part where I was a little bit confused. Throughout Dananjaya's speech, there were some areas where he jumped transitions or jumped into a different timeline, or rather jump into the next scene a bit too quickly. Dananjaya Hettiarachchi, the 2015 World Champion of Public Speaking in Toastmasters International. Now, if you haven't watched his speech, I highly recommend that you watch it before watching this video. So I'll leave the link in the description below. Now, the purpose of this video is just for us to identify what are the strengths that Dananjaya has as a speaker, and of course, what are some areas which, in just my personal opinion, which I thought could be a little bit better or maybe just sharpened a little bit. Now, as a disclaimer, my purpose here is just for learning purposes, and of course, Dananjaya has definitely earned his way to become the world champion that he is today. He's a fantastic speaker that we could learn a little bit by just critically analyzing the speech a little bit more. Let's get started. Now, the first thing is I'd like to talk about some of the strengths that Dananjaya has as a speaker. Number one, very humorous. Throughout the entire speech, from the opening to point number one, point number two, point number three, and finally the closing, each part has some form of humor or some form of giggle. So you take a look at the video later, you will notice some parts where the audience start giggling or they're laughing out loud. So that is his strength. If there's humor throughout the speech, people are going to feel very connected because people love to laugh. So that is his strength. Number two, relatable or relevant. Now, why I say that it's relatable is because the challenges that one goes through most likely fits into one of the things that he shared. Either you have felt broken, or even lost in life. And if you have, just like me, we would have definitely been able to relate to what Dananjaya has gone through. So relatability factor is right there. The third element is this whole speech, including the title, is catchy and memorable. I see something. Not only does this spark some form of curiosity in the audience's mind, but throughout the speech when he said it, it has been anchored with humor. So when people walk out of the room, or even when people stop watching the video, they will remember this so well. There's so many Toastmasters that I've met in Malaysia here that they are still talking about Dananjaya's speech. That is how powerful it is. That is how powerful he has made this speech become. He made it so catchy and so memorable. Now, let's talk about some areas which I thought could be fine-tuned just a little bit more. And we'll dive in part by part, watching the clip together. Are you ready? Let's watch it.
You and I are not very different from this flower. Just like this flower is unique, you are unique.
Okay, I'm gonna pause right here for a moment. So when he says, just like this flower is unique, you are unique, the first question that came to my mind is, how is this flower unique? So this did not really grab my attention, or rather it makes some confusion in my mind. I wanted to know, what does this mean? If you talk about the flower being unique, beautiful, or what is the features of this flower and how we relate to it, I think that could have been a stronger impact by saying that you and I are unique.
All of us has something special that makes us as beautiful. Do you know what makes you special?
Okay, so this particular part, he says that all of us have something that makes us special and as beautiful as the flower. So here is where he actually connected the dots, right? So my recommendation is, if you could bring this earlier, it would have made more sense or more flow, right? Perhaps you could say that you and I are no different from this flower. This flower has something that makes it so beautiful, so special, and so unique. And just like this flower is unique, you are unique. So now we can see the qualities of what this flower is, and now it relates back to us in terms of, I know what that quality means. Special, beautiful. Yeah? So that is what I thought could be a little bit better.
Now the answer to that can be a little difficult to find, because sometimes life has a cruel way of picking out your petals, breaking you in two, and throwing you into the trash. And when you're broken, it's very difficult to feel special.
Okay, so this part I'm not so sure what is the feeling that he's trying to go for. Maybe he's trying to lighten up the mood of the audience and not wanting them to feel too down. So if you notice that his facial expression in this part, he's smiling and he said the line, "When you're broken, it's very difficult to feel special," and he was smiling in this part. So I'm not so sure what is the feeling he wants to go for. Maybe he wants to liven up the mood a little bit. But my recommendation is, if he wants to stay in character and make people feel that it's difficult to feel special, maybe he could maintain the serious look. This also brings me to the next part of my feedback, which is the 3 elements in his speech. Now, I've watched Dananjaya's speech for a while now, so there were 3 elements that he brought up: being broke, lost, and broken. And he did not mention them, or rather the 2 main elements, in the front part of the speech. So if he would have said that when you're broken, broke, or lost, it's very difficult to feel special, then it would actually make sense for the remaining parts of the speech, which I will get into that later.
Mr. Contest Chair, my fellow flowers, I can remember the first time I broke. I was 17 years old. I had already flunked high school and managed to get myself arrested. Now, I wasn't afraid of the cops, but there was one person I was very afraid of, and that was my mama. Raise your hand if you have an emotional mother. Let me see. Put them all together, you get mama.
Very good use of humor over here. So he uses a lot of engagement techniques by getting them to raise their hands, being involved, and one thing that I really like is he caught us off guard there by saying, "Put them all together, you get my mama." So this actually makes it so humorous because everyone has their own mothers who are some level of emotional, but now he's saying that you put everything together, that's his. So you know the extent of exaggeration used in this part, which actually adds on to the humor. So great use over there.
I can hear her scream outside the police station. Even the cops were afraid. She came up to me, held the iron bars, looked into my eyes, and I saw a tear coming down her face. Now, I've seen my mama cry before, but mothers cry 3 types of tears. Tears of joy, tears of sorrow, and tears of shame. And when a son sees a mother cry tears of shame, that's a life-changing moment. She looked at me and said, "Son, I want you to be a better man." That night, when I drove home, my dad was waiting for me at home. Now, my dad is a cool dad. Raise your hand if you have a cool dad.
Okay, so this particular part where he's asking, "Raise your hand if you have a cool dad," is already a great use because the setup was with the mom. So when he uses this again, then the audience, you can hear they're already starting to laugh because they know what's gonna happen next.
Put them all together, you get my dad. My dad came up to me and said, "Son, it's okay. You flunked your exams. You already got arrested. That's fine. You get that from your mother's side."
Great use of humor, bringing back the mother as a character in the story.
"I want you to start working immediately." And I said, "Okay." So my dad took me to meet one of his friends called Sam. Now, Sam was an accountant who had an accounting firm and had generously decided to make me his personal assistant. And there he was. He looked like a teddy bear. But this man was special. I looked at him and he looked at me. And then he said the most amazing thing. He said, "Son, I see something in you, but I don't know what it is. If you decide to work with me, I can help you find that something."
So here is where he finally uses his catchphrase, the first time he uses catchphrase, and of course the title of his speech. And you can see when he anchored that with the humor, people tend to remember it better. So he did a very good job in setting this up.
And I was like, "Whoa, that's the first time in my whole life somebody has ever told they see something in me. And I started working for Sam. And every day after work, he used to tell me stories about the world, about history, about culture, about philosophy. And it was much more interesting than what I learned in school. And I discovered I can dream. And I started dreaming, ladies and gentlemen.
Okay, putting a pause there. So this is the part where I was a little bit confused. Throughout Dananjaya's speech, there were some areas where he jumped transitions or jumped into a different timeline, or rather jump into the next scene a bit too quickly. So sometimes, or rather, the first time you watch this speech, you may brush this off just like what I did. I actually brushed it off because I was so engrossed with the speech, right? But when you start to look deeper, you start to question, wait, what happened to this? What happened to that? So this is one of those parts. I can dream, and I started dreaming, ladies and gentlemen. Now, the question in my mind was, what did he started to dream? What was it that was in his mind that he was dreaming about? So that was a little bit of a question mark for me. Was it dreaming about going to college, which was his next part of the story, or what was it? So here, it was not answered for me. Maybe he could just add one line. I started dreaming about my future, dreaming about what life could be, blah, 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 blah. You know, something, a simple one-liner would fix that.
After 1 year, I went back into high school, completed my exams, and went into college. After successfully completing college, I found a great girl, but not a job.
Again, good humor.
I didn't know what I wanted to do with my life. Have you ever had that problem?
Great, I like this part. Have you ever had that problem? It's a good rhetorical question to keep the audience engaged. So when he says this, I'm sure a lot of audience will just do this. They start nodding their heads. Yeah? So it's a very good rhetorical question to ask.
And when you're lost, it's difficult to feel special.
Now I'm going to pause right here. So he says this part, when you're lost, it's difficult to feel special. So this is actually a good phrase in his entire speech. Remember in the opening he mentions that when you're broken, it's difficult to feel special, and then he jumps into the first part of the story. Now, my recommendation was at the opening he should have mentioned at least the three things, the three main elements, and then the first part of the story, he adds in that one more line, which is when you are broke, it's difficult to feel special. And then this story, when you're lost, it's difficult to feel special. So I think that way it would actually encompass the speech a little bit stronger.
So I went back to my cool dad. And I said, Dad, I feel lost. He said, you are like your mother. So my dad introduced me to this strange club that had a strange name, with strange people.
Alright, when he says strange club, it's a good foreshadowing for the audience to know where it's actually heading, and I believe those who are in the room would know that what he meant was a Toastmasters meeting.
Talking. On the first meeting, they told me to do something called a table topic. I aced it. But while I was speaking, I see a strange man seated in the back row. Humble, simple. The unfailing quality of kindness in his eyes. As soon as I finished, he walked up to me, looked me dead straight in the eye, and said, Son, I see something in you. But I don't know what it is. If you come here twice a month, maybe we can find that something.
Now this part, when he's talking about Toastmasters, it's a good way to resonate with Toastmasters members, especially using words like come here twice a month. Toastmasters members would know why, and that's why they start laughing. Table topics. So these things actually resonate with the audience, especially those in the room. My recommendation is if he could find a way so that non-Toastmasters who don't know what Toastmasters is about, don't know what a protocol of a Toastmasters is, maybe he could, make some form of a tiny explanation somewhere, somehow. Or maybe just don't talk about Toastmasters at all. Sometimes a speech like this, a storytelling speech like this, is best to speak to people outside of Toastmasters and not just be limited to Toastmasters in itself. So if you're crafting your speech, try not to just tell jokes or tell stories very closely related to just Toastmasters. Think of it more universal, where people outside the scope can also relate to that story.
And ladies and gentlemen, I discovered I could speak, and I love speaking. And that led me to become a teacher.
Now, this particular part, I was a little bit taken aback because of the shift in the tone. So if you notice that when he talked about, ladies and gentlemen, I could speak and I love speaking, and that led me to become a teacher. High tone, low tone. Yeah, so the shift there was a little bit too sudden for me, and it was a bit jarring for the listeners, especially for me. So I understand that the shift here was trying to shift to the next part of the story, which was supposed to be on a lower tone, but I believe a simple pause will make it better. For example, I discovered I could speak and I love speaking, and that led me to be a teacher. Something like that would be better, but it was too fast that it made it a little bit jarring to the ears.
I know what it's like to not have enough money in your bank.
Okay, now this part, he's jumping into the third part of the story, which is about his wife and not having enough money. So I believe that, again, this is one part here, he jumped a little bit too soon to the next scene. There was no proper setup or no explanation. So he jumped in and he started talking about it. So the question that I had in mind was, okay, he now has the voice to speak and to become a teacher. But what happened in between being a teacher and not having enough money in the bank account and then talking to the wife? So this particular part, if he could have mentioned some form of struggle being a teacher or having a job, but the job doesn't pay, then this part could connect a little bit better. So again, the transition was just a little bit too quick for me to understand why this scene existed.
Middle of the night, I wake up my beautiful wife and I ask her, honey, why did you marry me? She says, I saw something in you. But I still don't know what it is.
Great usage of humor again, and I like the shift, which means from the start it was I see something, now it's I saw something. So it's a very good shift over there, which actually added on more humor. So because this actually breaks away from the predictability factor, when people think that the person will say I see something, but now it's I saw something. Yeah, so there's a very good play of words over there by switching it into a past tense.
Ladies and gentlemen, today I'm a dreamer, I'm a speaker, and I learned the unfailing quality of unconditional love from my wife. I was broken, and I've been broken, lost, and broke many times in my life. But the people in my life were able to reach into the trash can and make me whole again. If it was up to me, I would have never been able to do that. And this is why if you have great...
Now I'm just going to pause here for a moment. So remember just now when we talked about the wife, correct? So what is the wife's role in this speech? And how did the wife, although showing unfailing qualities of love and unconditional love for him, how did that actually help him to get out of that? Because this could be a big concern. Maybe what he can say is, yes, my wife saw something in me, but she don't know what it is. Then he may have added one more line at the end by saying, but despite the challenges, she was there every step of the way. Then move on to the next step or the next part of the speech, which is the closing. So I thought that some lines need to be added to make the speech flow a little bit better. Currently, what I see right now is the speech jumping from scene to scene too quickly or too suddenly.
In your life, no matter how broke, how lost, or how broken you become, they can piece you back together. Ladies and gentlemen, when I look at you, I see something in you. but I don't know what it is. Over to you.
Great ending by repeating the title of the speech, really sealing the deal with that anchor of humor as well. So people remember this, and it's a very strong way to end. Yeah, it's very catchy, very memorable. Now, if we talk about this particular part, one thing that was in my mind was what's in it for the audience? What's next? What can we do as the listeners? Are we supposed to be great people in other people's lives? Are we supposed to appreciate the great peoples in our lives? And if there are no great peoples in our lives, how do we even find one? So this was a question that I had. Although it was a great speech, great humor, great storytelling, and there was just a lot of relevance in the speech, I just can't help to find myself what was next for me. But of course, the first few times as I watched his speech, I was mesmerized. I think he is a fantastic speaker. But of course, in any story or any speech or presentation that you give, what is the take home for the audience? That is the most important. Now, overall, I would like to end with one other thing. Let's talk about his delivery. As you notice in his speech, the way he delivered his presentation, his hand gestures were not very purposeful, in my personal opinion. So why I say this is because notice that he is a right hand dominant, which means that throughout his speech, the right hand does more of the talking, the non-verbal communication. Left hand, not so much. So what I thought could be better is certain aspects of his speech or certain words that he says, he could use some form of forming, pointing, pinching. You know, there are many different styles of using hand gestures, and I thought that the way that he uses hands could be a little bit better. Overall, congratulations Dananjaya, although I know now it has been 7 years since you have won the World Championship of Public Speaking, and no doubt this is a great speech and he deserved to be the world champion. So this is just my humble thoughts on what are his strengths and of course what are areas which I personally thought could be a little bit better. But overall, great speech nonetheless. So for you audience who are watching and all the way to the end right here, thank you so much for watching, and I hope that this will be able to add some insights for the speech that you are going to prepare for the next and upcoming contest. If you have any questions or any concerns or any thoughts on how can I make my speech better, what can I do, what is the next step, how can I deliver it better, comment down below and I'll be more than happy to share with you on what you could do next for your speech contest. With that, thank you so much for watching. Like, share, subscribe for more videos like this. Take care!